Um, I want to start today by asking you to do something kind of difficult. I want you to clear your mind.
That is a pretty big ask right off the bat.
Yeah, I know. But completely clear it. Forget everything you know about gravity.
Right.
Forget the solar system. Forget the whole idea that the universe is this, dark, cold, empty void where rocks spin around balls of fire in predictable orbits.
So we're just doing a hard reset on our entire understanding of astrophysics.
Exactly. A complete reset. I want you to imagine a turtle.
And we really aren't talking about, like, a garden variety reptile you'd find down at the local pond.
No, definitely not. This is the starting point of the source material for today's deep dive. We're looking at a set of texts that describe a world that defies literally every law of physics we know.
Yeah.
Yet somehow it operates on a logic that feels almost, well, disturbingly familiar. We're talking about the great Atuan.
The star turtle. It is the absolute foundational image of Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic. And right off the bat, I think it's crucial to understand that this isn't just a generic fantasy setting.
Right, it's not just a quirky backdrop.
Exactly. It's an actual cosmological argument.
Which is fascinating because usually when you dive into high fantasy, you just get a map.
Yeah, a nice parchment map.
Right. It says, here be dragons, here's the Dark Lord, spiky tower, that sort of thing. But Pratchett starts with what the text actually calls astropsychology.
Astropsychology.
Yeah, and I was reading through the source material, and this concept really stuck out to me. It felt super significant. So what exactly is astropsychology in this specific context?
Well, think about our own universe for a second. When we look up at the stars, we ask physics questions.
Like, how did it start?
Right, or where is it going? What's the velocity of that galaxy? But on the Discworld, the universe, the actual container for the whole world, is a living entity.
The great Ituan is alive.
Exactly. So the question isn't just, what is the trajectory? The real question the scientists are asking is, what is the turtle thinking?
That is such a fundamental shift. You're moving completely from mechanics to psychology.
You really are. And the source material describes Atuan in such majestic, almost overwhelming detail. It's 10,000 miles long.
Wow.
Its shell is pocked with meteor craters because it's just been swimming through the interstellar gulf for absolute eons.
Yeah, the text says its eyes are the size of seas.
Crusted with rumum and stardust, it's incredibly ancient.
And the craziest part is, it's not just the turtle. Standing on the shell, which is just mind-boggling to even try and visualize, are 4 giant elephants.
Yes. Borrelia, Tubul, Great Tufon, and Jerikeen.
I just love that they have names.
Right.
It makes them feel like actual characters rather than just, architectural columns holding up a roof.
They're the literal pillars of the world.
Yeah.
Their shoulders support the disc itself. And because they are living, breathing creatures, the world actually shakes when they adjust their footing.
So earthquakes aren't tectonic plates shifting.
No, an earthquake is just Tobal getting a cramp in his leg and shifting his weight.
That is brilliant.
Okay.
But going back to the astropsychology part for a second, this leads to these incredible academic factions you see early in the book. You've got these steady-gate theorists on one side and the Big Bang theorists on the other. And reading their arguments, it honestly felt like a total parody of the department meetings at a real-world university.
Oh, absolutely. It's a direct, hilarious satire of the steady-state theory versus the Big Bang theory in our own actual cosmology, but it's filtered through this giant reptilian lens.
Right.
So the steady-gate faction believes the turtle has always been swimming and will always be swimming.
It's the safe answer.
Totally safe. It's the boring academic answer. Nothing to see here. Just keep measuring the turtle's swim speed.
It's the path of least resistance for a tenure-track wizard. But the Big Bang theory, that's one that gets a little spicy in the text.
It really does. Because if you accept that the universe is a giant turtle, you have to ask yourself a basic biological question.
Which is?
What do turtles do, biologically speaking?
They meet.
They mate. So the Big Bang hypothesis suggests Atuan isn't just swimming aimlessly, it's swimming toward a specific destination.
A cosmic mating ground.
Yes.
So the bang they are predicting isn't an explosion of matter like in our physics?
No, not at all. The theory posits that Atuan will eventually meet another star turtle in the deep void. And the bang is, well, it's a moment of passionate union between two star-sized reptiles.
Which would supposedly create new turtles.
Exactly. Little baby universes swimming off into the void, each carrying their own new flat worlds. It frames the entire existence of their world as essentially just a very long journey toward reproduction.
And the people living on the disk are completely terrified of this, right?
Terrified.
Because presumably the shaking involved in that process, the mating of two 10,000-mile-long turtles, would be pretty catastrophic for the little flat world resting on top.
Yeah. Oh, civilization would be shaken off like dandruff. It would be the end of everything.
It's amazing how Pratchett takes a profound cosmological myth and then immediately just slaps bureaucracy and academic infighting right on top of it.
It's his signature move.
And speaking of the world resting on top, we should unpack the geography for a minute. Because the world is flat.
Yes.
It's a disk. So you can't really use our standard compass points, can you?
No, north and south are completely meaningless when you have a hub in the exact center and a rim at the outer edge.
Right.
The magnetic field, if there even is one, just doesn't work that way. So they use a completely different directional system.
Upward and rimward.
Right. Hubward is heading towards the center, where the great spire of the Cori Celesti stands. That's the mountain home of the gods. And rimward is heading towards the outer edge, where the ocean literally falls off.
And then what about for rotation, since the disk is spinning?
You have turnwise, which is moving with the spin of the disk.
Okay.
And widdershins, which is moving against the spin.
Widdershins. That is such a great word. It feels really archaic.
It is an old word. In our own Earth folklore, walking widdershins like counterclockwise around a church was supposedly a way to summon the devil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it implies going against the natural order of things, but on the disk, it's literally just a standard direction on the map.
And if you travel far enough rimward, you hit the edge, the rim fall. The source material describes this as basically the most impressive sight in the entire universe.
Imagine the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans just simply pouring off a ledge.
I can't even fathom the scale.
It's a waterfall, thousands of miles long, crashing straight down into the vacuum of space. The noise would be totally deafening. And the mist rises up and freezes instantly in the vacuum.
And hanging right over that massive waterfall is the rainbow. But it's not a normal rainbow.
No, it's the rainbow.
The rainbow.
And it has 8 colors.
And this is exactly where we get to the title of the book, right? The 8th color.
Yes. Octarine, the color of magic.
I tried so hard to visualize this while reading, and I think I actually gave myself a headache. How does the text describe it again?
It's described as a fluorescent greenish yellow purple.
Which, that shouldn't exist. You can't put those colors together.
That's entirely the point. It's the pigment of the imagination.
Right.
It resides in the spectrum just beyond violet, but it's only visible to wizards and cats.
Wait, why cats? I noticed that detail, but didn't quite get it.
Because cats are inherently magical creatures in the Pratchett universe. They just see things that aren't there.
That checks out.
But octarine is the actual visual signature of raw magic. It's caused by the scatter effect of strong sunlight hitting a very dense magical field. So if you see octarine, you know reality's getting extremely thin.
So the world is magical, the physics are completely magical, even the light is magical. But who is actually running the show? Because the source material gives us this incredible glimpse into the hub, specifically a place called Dun Manifestin.
Yes, the hone of the gods. And the prologue gives us this really unforgettable scene. Dun Manifestin is depicted as this high-gabled, stuccoed, suburban house.
That's a code.
Yeah, just a very normal, slightly tacky house. But it's situated at the absolute center of the universe, atop a 10-mile-high spire of ice.
Such a jarring image for the reader. You expect Olympus, right? With gleaming marble columns and clouds and grand thrones, and you get a stucco house.
Exactly.
But inside, they aren't managing the weather or benevolently answering prayers. What are they doing?
They're playing a board game.
A bird game.
A board game where the tiny little pieces are the actual lives of human beings down on the disc. This is a crucial metaphor for the whole story we're exploring today. The randomness of the universe isn't just blind chaos. It is literally the gods rolling dice for fun.
And we meet some of the players at the table. Blind Io is the chief god.
Blind Io is actually terrifying if you stop to think about him. He has no eyes in his sockets, just smooth, blank skin. But he has dozens of disembodied eyes floating around his head like little satellites. So he's watching the board and everything else from every conceivable angle.
And he's playing against a very specific opponent in this scene.
Fate.
Fate is described as this heavy, inexorable presence at the table.
Fate is essentially the boring player. He
Huh.
always wins because eventually everything dies.
Right.
Fate is the house edge in a casino. He plays the long game. He's just throwing constant obstacles at the board trolls, fires, assassins, knowing that statistically he will eventually grind the heroes down to dust.
But then there's the other player. The text points out she has green eyes, but she's never actually named. Why is she never named?
Because she is the anthropomorphic personification of luck.
Okay.
And the golden rule of luck is that the moment you identify it, the moment you rely on it or call its name, it disappears.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
She is simply known as the Lady. And she is the only entity who can actually beat fate.
And her move in the game is so interesting. Fate plays these massive world-ending threats. And the lady just pushes a couple of seemingly pathetic pieces forward. A Renegade Whifford and a Clerk.
I love how Offler, the crocodile god, speaks with a lisp because of his giant tusks. Ooh, Renegade Whifford.
Yes.
But yes, this wager completely sets up the entire narrative. The story we were diving into is essentially a game of Dungeons and Dragons being played by board gods, and our main characters are the pawns.
But there's a specific mechanic here that I think is just brilliant. The 1,000,000-to-1 shot.
Ah, yes. This is a core law of the Discworld. It's called narrative causality.
Let's really unpack that for the listener. Narrative causality.
Sure. In our universe, physics dictates what happens. If you jump off a high cliff, gravity pulls you down, you hit the ground, you die.
Standard.
But in the Discworld, stories dictate what happens. If you jump off a cliff, you might actually survive, if and only if your survival makes for a much better story.
So if the heroes are backed into a corner, completely outnumbered 1,000,000-to-1.
In our world, they just die. Game over. Right.
On the Discworld, if you are outnumbered exactly 1,000,000-to-1, you absolutely must survive. Because a 1,000,000-to-1 shot crops up 9 times out of 10.
That is hilarious.
The lady is essentially weaponizing the laws of drama against the laws of mathematical probability. She knows that the universe intrinsically wants a good, dramatic ending.
So to win the game, she deliberately picks the most unlikely, pathetic heroes possible to maximize those dramatic odds.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, let's officially meet them. Because they are not your typical fantasy heroes at all, let's start with the wizard piece on the board, Rincewind.
Rincewind is, well, he's a complicated figure.
That's one word for it.
He's a wizard, technically
Yeah,
speaking. He wears the pointy hat. It even says wizard on it, prominently spelled with 2 Z's.
Which really feels like he's trying entirely too hard to convince people.
Exactly. He
Yeah.
attended Unseen University, which is the premier magical institution on the disc, but he failed miserably. He's a complete dropout. But I think it's important to note, he didn't fail because he's stupid, right? He failed because of a specific incident with a book called the Octavo.
Correct. The Octavo is the creator's own personal grimoire. It is the single most powerful book of magic in existence. It was basically left behind after the universe was constructed.
Like leaving a wrench under the hood of a car.
Yes. And Rincewind, acting on a foolish student bet, snuck into the library and opened it.
And this is where it gets kind of scary for him.
He looked at a page, and one of the 8 great spells of creation literally jumped off the parchment and lodged itself directly into his brain.
Just reading that made me anxious. It's like downloading a file that is way too big for your hard drive.
It's much worse than that. It's like downloading a sentient AI into a pocket calculator. The text explains that this spell is so incredibly loud, so dominant, that it actively scared all the other normal spells away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Rincewind literally cannot learn even basic magic because this one great spell is taking up all the mental real estate. It's just sitting in his mind waiting to be said.
So he's a professional wizard who can't actually do any magic. So what does he do instead?
He runs.
He runs away.
He is a linguist, which is certainly useful for traveling, but his primary defining skill is absolute cowardice. He describes himself as having a lingering taste for heterosexuality and a burning, passionate desire to just stay alive.
He's deeply cynical, isn't he? He knows exactly how this magical world works.
He knows that the world is actively trying to kill him at all times. He has absolutely no illusions about honor or bravery or destiny. He just wants to eat some potatoes and sleep in a bed that isn't currently on fire.
Which makes him the absolutely perfect foil for the other major piece on the board, Twoflower.
Yes. Twoflower is the catalyst for everything that goes wrong. He is the Discworld's very first tourist.
I love the concept of a tourist in a gritty, high fantasy setting. It's such a massive clash of genres.
It really is. Twoflower comes from the Agatean Empire, which is located on the counterweight continent.
So why is it called the counterweight continent?
Well, thinking physically, the disc needs to be balanced on the elephants.
Yeah.
The main continent where all the action happens is huge, so on the exact opposite side, there has to be a smaller continent made of something incredibly dense and heavy to keep the disc from wobbling.
And that super heavy substance is gold.
Solid gold. In the Agatean Empire, gold is as common as iron or dirt is to us. It's practically a base metal.
So Twoflower arrives in Ankh-Morpork, which is this incredibly gritty, dangerous, poverty-stricken city, carrying a chest entirely full of pure gold coins, just wanting to see the local sights.
He is walking inflation. He doesn't realize that a single one of his coins could buy a city block.
Yeah.
He's just handing them out as casual tips to tavern owners.
And he sees the whole dangerous world through literal rose-tinted glasses.
Spectacles, yes. He is desperate to see heroes and tavern brawls and quaint slums. He interprets desperate poverty as rustic charm.
Right.
He interprets mortal danger as a fun adventure.
It's a pretty sharp critique of tourism, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The way we often go to other places and treat the locals' actual daily struggles as a performance for our own amusement.
Oh, 100%. Twoflower is the ultimate innocent, but his innocence is wildly dangerous to everyone around him. He disrupts the entire economy of Ankh-Morpork just by paying for lunch.
And Rincewind gets completely roped into this mess because the ruler of the city, the patrician, steps in.
The patrician is a master of cold pragmatism. He realizes that if this little tourist with the endless gold is murdered in an alley, which is highly likely in Ankh-Morpork, the Agatean Empire, which is incredibly rich and powerful, might send a massive fleet to burn Ankh-Morpork to the ground.
So it's pure geopolitical dread.
Exactly. He summons Rincewind to the palace and basically says, keep this tourist alive or I will kill you in a very interesting and prolonged way.
Great motivator.
So Rincewind, the ultimate survivor, is forcibly drafted into being a tour guide to a man who has zero survival instincts.
And accompanying Twoflower is perhaps the most iconic object in all of the source material. We have to talk about the luggage.
The luggage. It's a full-fledged character in its own right.
It's a large travel chest made of something called sapient pearwood. And a sapient meaning, it actually thinks.
It thinks and it moves. It has hundreds of little pink legs that retract when it sits down.
That image, just hundreds of little human-like legs scuttling across the cobblestones. It's honestly kind of disturbing.
It's entirely meant to be disturbing, and it is fiercely, homicidally loyal to its master. It will follow Twoflower anywhere.
Across dimensions, right?
Across dimensions, through hell, underwater, it doesn't matter. And if anyone or anything threatens Twoflower, the luggage just pops open its lid and, well, the threat is never seen again.
Rincewind has this really great realization when he first sees it in the tavern. He looks at this scuttling box and realizes that sapient pearwood is incredibly magical and basically extinct.
Yes.
The wooden box itself is worth vastly more than the fortune in gold coins inside it.
The luggage acts exactly like a shark. It eats thieves, it tramples assassins, but at the same time, it faithfully washes Twoflower's underwear and presses his shirts.
It's amazing.
It is the ultimate travel accessory, but metaphorically, it also represents the baggage we bring with us when we travel. Twoflower brings his home comforts, his rigid expectations, and his clean laundry straight into the wildest dangers.
So we have a cowardly wizard, a painfully naive tourist, and a walking killer suitcase. And they are loose in Ankh-Morpork. Let's talk about the city itself. The source describes it as proud Ankh and pestilent Morpork.
It is a total masterpiece of urban fantasy writing. It's basically London in the 18th century, but somehow worse. It smells unimaginably bad. The River Ankh is famously described as being too thick to drink, but too thin to actually plow.
And the crime in the city is literally legalized.
Regulated is a better word. That's a patrician's genius. You have a formal thieves guild. You have a highly esteemed assassins guild. If you want to commit a crime, you have to be a licensed professional.
Which makes the whole underworld weirdly bureaucratic.
It really does. You can pay an annual fee directly to the Thieves Guild, and they give you a receipt so you don't get robbed for the rest of the year. It's essentially just a municipal tax.
So into this highly structured chaos walks Twoflower. He goes to a tavern called the Broken Drum. And this sets off what we'll call the insurance disaster.
This is genuinely my favorite scene in the first segment. It is a perfect collision of economics and culture. Twoflower tries to explain the modern concept of insurance to the tavern's innkeeper, a man named Broadman.
Now, to you and me, insurance is incredibly boring. It's just paperwork and premiums.
Yeah.
But explain how Broadman, a fantasy innkeeper, hears this concept.
So Twoflower calls it in-sewer ants, and he explains the basic mechanics. He says, I pay you a small amount of money right now. This is the premium. If your inn burns down or gets robbed, the magic of the insurance pays you a huge fortune so you can rebuild it.
And Broadman, being a highly cynical Morporkian who has obviously never heard of risk pooling or actuarial tables,
He hears a bet. He thinks, wait a minute. You are betting me that my inn won't burn down. And if I lose the bet, if my inn actually catches fire, I get incredibly rich.
so Broadman looks at the odds, looks at the massive payout, and decides to instantly rig the game.
Immediately, he realizes that the inn is worth significantly more as ash than it is as a standing building. So the very moment Twoflower signs the paper, Broadman heads straight down to the cellar with a match.
It's such a biting satire. Pratchett is basically suggesting that the concept of insurance actually actively encourages disaster if the moral hazard is high enough.
It is the absolute law of unintended consequences. Twoflower thinks he's being a civilized modern man offering some nice financial security to a local business.
And Broadman thinks he's just hit the jackpot.
Exactly.
And because Ankh-Morpork is largely built of very old timber, thatch, and waterproofing tar.
The fire spreads instantly. It's not just the inn that goes up. The entire city catches fire.
So the Great Fire of Ankh-Morpork, this legendary historical disaster, is caused simply because a tourist tried to sell a fire insurance policy.
That is precisely what the text implies. And right in the middle of this raging fire, we finally get the classic tavern brawl that Twoflower has been begging to see.
He's so happy about it. The entire city is burning down, people are screaming, and he's just standing there taking pictures.
He thinks it's all part of the local show. He's saying, oh, how authentic, a real brawl. And he's actively using his iconograph to document it.
Which is another amazing detail. The camera isn't mechanical.
No, technology on the disc is very often just biology trapped in a box. The camera contains a literal imp, a tiny little demon with a tiny palette and tiny brushes. It paints the pictures very, very fast.
And in the sheer confusion of the brawl, the imp actually goes on strike, doesn't it?
It runs out of pink paint. It flatly refuses to take any more pictures of people because it can't get the skin tones right without pink.
That's hilarious.
It's that wonderful collision of the highly magical and the frustratingly mundane. The magical imp is just a union worker with a totally valid workplace grievance.
So the city is burning. The luggage is happily eating assassins. Specifically, the source mentions the assassins Strenwithal and Slorflannelfoot. And Rincewind is absolutely terrified. They just barely escape through the city gates. Which leads us to segment 4, and the story takes a turn into something much, much darker. The Temple of Bel-Shamaroth.
Yeah, this segment shifts the tone completely. We go straight from sharp urban satire to a full-blown parody of Lovecraftian horror. They get separated while riding through a dense forest, and Rincewind runs into a tree.
Literally into a tree.
Yeah.
And he gets captured by a dryad.
But these aren't the nice, gentle, Tolkien-esque nature spirits who sing pretty songs.
No.
The source material describes these dryads as incredibly dangerous. They are hive-minded, they are the spirit of the dark wood, and nature is extremely cruel. Rincewind hurt the tree when he clumsily climbed it, physically scraping the bark, so the dryads fully intend to hurt him back.
They drag him towards a temple deep in the woods. And this leads to the introduction of a specific number, a number that all wizards are absolutely terrified of.
The number 8.
Why can't they just say it? I notice Rincewind keeps calling it the number between 7 and 9, or he'll say twice 4.
Because on the Discworld, 8 is the fundamental number of magic. It's the number of the color spectrum. But specifically in this dark context, it is the number of Bel-Shamaroth, the Soul Eater.
Also known as the Sender of 8.
Right.
It's like saying Beetlejuice. You just don't do it.
Exactly. The universe is highly sensitive to spoken words. If you say the number 8 out loud in a place of high background magic, you act as a metaphysical beacon. You will summon the entity.
And of course, despite trying to avoid it, they end up trapped in his temple.
Which is a complete architectural nightmare. It's 8-sided, the floor tiles are 8-sided, every single angle feels completely wrong to the human eye. It is non-Euclidean geometry specifically designed to summon a horror from the dungeon dimensions.
But luckily, they aren't alone in there. This is where we officially meet Run the Barbarian.
Run is the quintessential classic fantasy hero. Think of Conan the Barbarian, but with somehow more muscles and significantly less brain power. He is running around practically naked in a loincloth, completely oiled up, and he's only there to loot the temple.
He's a professional hero.
He really is.
Yeah.
He treats heroism like a 9-to-5 job. He has a rigid schedule. He expects to rescue damsels and find treasure because that's just what the job description entails.
And he carries a very unique sword. Kring.
Kring is fantastic. It's a highly sentient, magical black sword, but instead of being thirsty for blood or ominously chanting doom like you'd expect, it's just, well, chatty.
It complains constantly, right?
It gossips, it talks incessantly about its past owners, it actively critiques Hrun's fighting style while he's swinging it. At one point, it even mentions it would really like to just settle down and be a plowshare for a while because that sounds like a job with an actual point to it.
I love the idea that this legendary mighty weapon is basically having a midlife existential crisis. So Rincewind, Twoflower, Run, and the complaining sword were all trapped in the center of this temple. And the monster finally appears.
Belshamharoth. It's a classic Lovecraftian elder god, just a horrifying creature made of massive tentacles and a giant central eye. It's ancient, and it drags them relentlessly toward the central pit.
And Rincewind, despite being a failed wizard, actually knows exactly why this is happening to them. It's because he has that one great spell stuck in his head, right?
Yes, the spell creates a massive magical resonance. The Soul Eater literally eats magic. Rincewind is walking around like a giant neon beacon of delicious magical energy.
But he can't even use the spell to defend himself.
No, he's totally helpless.
So how do they actually survive? The solution is so perfectly Terry Pratchett. It's not the magic sword. It's not a heroic fireball.
It's the camera.
The iconograph.
Yes. Twoflower, oblivious as always, decides he wants to take a picture of the horrifying monster. Just one for the photo album. Now, we have to remember exactly how the flash mechanism works on this camera.
It's a standard attachment.
A standard magical attachment. The flash uses salamanders, but not the little amphibians we know. These are elemental lizards that live entirely in fire, and they feed exclusively on octarine light, the raw light of magic.
So these salamanders have been cooped up inside this dark little box, getting really hungry.
Starving. When Twoflower casually triggers the shutter, the salamanders release all of their stored magical energy in one massive, concentrated burst to illuminate the scene for the imp.
And since Belshamharoth is a creature made of shadow and dark magic,
the flash completely overloads it. It's like hitting a creature of absolute darkness with a nuclear blast of anti-magic light.
wow.
The monster is instantly stunned, blinded, and violently repelled back into the pit.
It's technology, or at least the Discworld's weird biological version of technology, completely defeating ancient, terrifying superstition.
Precisely. The tourist's absolute ignorance saves the day once again. He just wanted a nice vacation photo. He had no idea he was wielding a weapon of mass illumination.
And then the temple itself starts to collapse because time, which had been artificially held back by the monster's magic, rushes back in all at once.
This is such a great sci-fi concept wrapped in fantasy. The temple is physically thousands of years old, but the dense magic has kept it perfectly preserved. When the monster is defeated, the magic fails.
So thousands of years of aging happen in a matter of seconds.
Yes. The stone rots immediately, the structure crumbles to dust, and they only escape by the absolute skin of their teeth.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of the journey. The Wormberg.
The geography here gets even weirder, if you can believe it.
Oh, I believe it.
They travel further hubward, deep into the high mountains, and they enter a specific zone where the background magic field is incredibly dense.
How do they actually know they're in a high magic zone?
Rincewind tests it. He tosses a coin.
The coin toss scene. I love this part.
He tosses a coin to test the local fabric of reality. In a normal world, it's heads or tails. Here, it lands perfectly on its edge. So he tosses another one. Halfway down, it turns into a caterpillar.
And another one just straight up explodes.
Exactly. The fundamental laws of probability are completely broken here.
And because the ambient magic is so incredibly strong, it can support physically impossible structures. They find the Wormberg, and the text describes it as an inverted mountain.
It is entirely upside down.
Just upside down.
Imagine a massive mountain range, but flipped. It's very broad and flat at the top, which acts as a plateau. And it tapers all the way down to a sharp needlepoint at the bottom. And it is just hovering there in the air over a valley.
How on earth does it stay up?
The text explains that it's anchored by the sheer heaviness of the magic. The magic in that valley is so thick it acts like a buoyant fluid or a physical structural support holding the rock in place.
And living inside this impossible upside-down mountain is a society of dragon riders. Now, Twoflower has been dying to see a dragon since he arrived. He's got his guidebook, he's totally ready. But the dragons here come with a major catch.
There's always a catch on the disc. The world has two distinct types of dragons, Draconis vulgaris, which are your common swamp dragons. They are small, they get heartburn, and they have a strong tendency to accidentally blow themselves up. They are actual biological animals.
But the ones in the Vernberg are Draconis nobilis.
Noble dragons. Huge, majestic, glittery scales, breathing massive plumes of fire. But they are essentially tulpas, they're thought forms.
So they are imaginary.
They are real, but their reality is entirely sustained by the intense willpower of the writer. They only exist because the people in the Vernberg deeply believe they exist.
The magic field is the canvas.
And the writer's mind is the paint.
That is genuinely terrifying. Imagine you're flying thousands of feet in the air on a creature that actively requires your constant focused attention just to remain solid. If you get distracted by a bird or a sneeze,
down you go, you plummet. Rincewind actually experiences this phenomenon firsthand. He is riding one, and he suddenly sees right through the dragon. It becomes semi-transparent just because the rider's concentration wavered for a split second.
So this entire society of dragon riders has to be built on pure, unadulterated ego.
It has to be. The strongest wills naturally rule because they are able to project the biggest, most solid dragons. If you have any self-doubt whatsoever, your dragon is small, weak, and translucent.
And the politics of the Vernberg reflect that instability. You have Grisha, the old king, who is currently dead.
Dead, but he's still hanging around.
He's fully dead, but his willpower is so strong he refuses to pass on. He just stays in his own corpse. Literally a withered skeleton sitting on a throne just to annoy his three children, Liesa, Leo.RT, and the other brother.
He absolutely will not let them inherit the throne until one of them proves they are mentally strong enough to violently take it from the others.
He's literally haunting his own succession crisis.
That's fantastic.
And Liesa, the daughter, is incredibly ambitious.
Huh?
She spots Hearn the Barbarian and thinks, okay, if I marry this massive warrior, his physical strength plus my mental will creates an unbeatable alliance to take the throne.
So she naturally kidnaps the entire party. But she gets Rincewind and Twoflower as an unwanted package deal.
Which directly leads to Rincewind being forced to fight a lethal duel.
Poor Rincewind. He is dragged out and forced to fight Leo.RT, one of the rival brothers.
And where does this grand duel actually happen?
On the ceiling.
Sorry, did you say on the ceiling?
Yes. The Vernberg is a holly mountain. The dragons roost deep inside in giant cavernous rooms, and the dragon riders use specialized hook boots to walk entirely upside down on brass rings set into the cavern roof.
So Rincewind, a man who's petrified of heights, has to fight a trained dragon lord, completely upside down, hanging by his boots over a drop that goes miles straight down into the open air.
It is his ultimate worst-case nightmare. He is dangling over pure nothingness. Leo.RT is supremely confident, smoothly swinging his sword, and Rincewind is essentially just screaming in terror.
But this is where Pratchett subverts the trope again. Rincewind doesn't win because he suddenly finds his inner bravery and bests the warrior. He wins because he is a profound coward.
Right, wins in is definitely a strong word for what happens. He survives. He uses Kring, the magic sword, which basically does all the complex parrying for him.
True.
But the real turning point of the duel is when Rincewind panics and physically grabs Leo.RT.
He hugs him.
He clings to him like a desperate limpet. He wraps his arms and legs around the Dragon Lord and loudly threatens to unhook his own boots from the ceiling rings.
It's mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. Rincewind essentially says, I am so terrified right now that I might faint. If I faint, I fall. And if I fall, I am absolutely taking you down with me.
And Leo.RT is a trained warrior. He fully expects a sword duel. He has no idea how to handle a sweaty, screaming suicide pact.
Rincewind's sheer, unadulterated desperation completely overrides the Dragon Lord's arrogant confidence.
But the real climax of their escape isn't the duel. It's Twoflower. Because we have to remember, the dragons in this zone are powered entirely by imagination.
And Twoflower has the vast, unchecked imagination of a naive tourist who has spent his entire life reading high fantasy books in a boring office. His head is stuffed full of vivid, colorful, high-definition dragons.
So while Rincewind is dangling from the ceiling, Twoflower is locked in a dungeon cell. And he just starts daydreaming about dragons. Not the wimpy, fading dragons the locals use, but the massive, godlike dragons from his storybooks.
And because the magic field around him is so incredibly high,
He actually summons one.
9 reads, He summons a dragon so overwhelmingly powerful and solid that it effortlessly smashes straight through the dungeon walls. Twoflower unknowingly possesses what they call the power.
He creates a dragon that is significantly more real than the local real dragons, simply because his belief is so pure and uncomplicated. He doesn't have any of the cynicism of the locals.
That is exactly it. It's such a pure validation for him. He traveled all this way wanting to see dragons, and he literally willed the biggest one ever into existence.
It even impresses the dead king Grisha. It definitively proves that untainted imagination is the strongest form of magic in that place.
It's a great moment.
So they end up escaping the Wurmberg, flying on the back of this imaginary dragon. And that's pretty much where we leave them physically in this specific book. But before we wrap up, we really need to talk about the deeper themes running through this text. Because underneath all the jokes, Pratchett is doing some very serious thematic work.
He definitely is. We should start by talking about death.
Capital D, Death, the character.
Right. The character of Death appears to Rincewind multiple times throughout the story. He shows up in the burning city, he's waiting in the tree near the temple, and he's standing by during the upside-down duel.
And he's not just a mindless force of nature swinging aside. He has a distinct personality.
He is profoundly annoyed. Death carries a ledger, an appointment book. Rincewind is scheduled to die. The fact that he keeps inexplicably surviving is really messing up Death's paperwork.
It's a fantastic running gag, and Rincewind can actually see Death standing there because, as a wizard, even a totally failed one, he has the ability to see into the octarine spectrum.
It's a constant visual reminder that Rincewind is living on completely borrowed time. He isn't surviving because he's strong or chosen by destiny. He's surviving because he's unbelievably slippery. He is a statistical anomaly in the system.
Then there's the major theme of cultural clash, which feels like the true heart of the book's satire.
Definitely. You have Twoflower, who views the entire world as a curated theme park. He genuinely thinks a grimy dungeon is quaint. He thinks a lethal tavern brawl is authentic local entertainment. He's the ultimate privileged observer.
While Rincewind sees absolutely everything as a lethal threat, he's the exhausted local who knows exactly how dangerous his own neighborhood is.
And then you add Harun to the mix, who looks at everything and only sees a potential source of loot or XP. You have three completely different characters looking at the exact same event and experiencing three entirely different realities.
Pratchett is showing us how our expectations and our personal backgrounds completely shape the world we see.
Exactly. Twoflower is quite literally protected by his own ignorance.
And his gold.
And his gold. The source material makes a very deliberate point that gold has its own kind of heavy magic.
It really does.
It instantly calms people down, it opens locked doors, it acts as a physical shield. In many ways, Twoflower is basically invincible just because he's rich and completely oblivious to consequence.
Finally, let's look at the nature of magic itself in this setting. In most traditional fantasy, magic is mystical, beautiful, and wonderful.
Here, it's treated almost exactly like nuclear radiation.
Right.
It has a half-life. It physically contaminates the environment. It makes coins mutate or explode. It mutates the landscape into these weird high magic zones.
And the spells themselves are actually alive.
Yes, that's a fascinating detail. The spell trapped inside Rincewind's head isn't just a string of magical words. It's a semi-sentient entity that deeply wants to be spoken.
It actively protects Rincewind during the Soul Eater encounter, but only to preserve itself.
Exactly. Rincewind is just the biological casing for the spell. If he dies, the spell dies, so it keeps him alive. It's totally parasitic.
So we've covered the giant star turtle, the great fire, the horrifying Soul Eater, and the upside-down dragon mountain. Just a totally typical week on the Discworld.
It is quite a lot to take in all at once.
It is. But if we pull back from the plot, what does this all mean for us? Why should you, listening right now, care about this story?
Well, I think we have to consider the final provocative thought laid out in the source material. The text explicitly mentions that the Discworld exists because, and I'm quoting here, every improbability curve must have its far end.
Okay, let's unpack that concept. What does that actually mean?
It mathematically suggests that if the multiverse is truly infinite, then absolutely everything that can happen must happen somewhere. The Discworld is simply the specific place where the impossible happens every day.
It's the cosmic repository for everything that doesn't fit neatly into standard physics.
Right. It's where the million-to-one shots live.
Which heavily implies that our world
is the boring dimension.
Wow.
We are the world where things just make sense, where apples fall down, not sideways. We're the world the gods actively ignore because our physics are way too rigid for them to play dice with. We are essentially the control group of the universe.
That is a wildly humbling thought. We're just the beige wallpaper of the cosmos.
We really are. But I think it also raises a really compelling question for the listener.
What's that?
If the Wimberg shows us that raw imagination can physically become reality when the ambient conditions are right, what incredible things are we suppressing in our own world just because we rely too much on logic?
You mean, could we actually summon a dragon?
Perhaps not a physical, fire-breathing one, but the source material clearly shows that deep belief has profound power.
Twoflowers believed in dragons so hard that the very fabric of the universe bent around him to provide one.
And Broadman believed in the concept of free money so hard that he happily burned his own city to the ground.
So the stories we tell ourselves, whether they're about economics or danger or what is fundamentally possible, they shape our reality just as much as octarine light shapes the Discworld.
Exactly.
So next time you're looking at a standard map or an ordinary rainbow or just dragging a really heavy piece of luggage through an airport, ask yourself, what would this look like if the probability curve was just a little bit different?
And maybe double check to see if your luggage has started growing little pink legs.
Always check for legs. That is great advice. Well, that's it for this deep dive into the color of magic. Thanks for listening.